This is the Business Storytelling Show with Christoph Trapp. Name a top 20 storytelling podcast and a top 5% podcast globally. Christoph chats with thought leaders and experts to share tips and tricks that can help you tell your company's stories better to drive business results. Available wherever you listen to podcasts, live streamed on major social media channels, and part of the DB&A television network. Available on most U.S. television sets and streaming on Roku and Amazon Fire. Here's Christoph with today's episode. Let's go.
Let's go, business storytellers. How's everyone doing? Hey, today we want to talk about leading, or rather unleading. How do we build those relationships and actually move things forward? Céline Schillinger is the author of Dare to Unlead. You can scan the book right there, the code. We are also live on Amazon, so everything you see around me, you can find directly in the Amazon carousel. If you're not watching on Amazon, please feel free to search for Christoph Trapp on Amazon, and you should find my storefront pretty quickly. Of course, Celine's book is there as well. Talking about books really briefly, as Marketing a Good Career is now out. Currently, today, I don't know why it says $0, but if you're watching this live, it's pretty close to $0. 99 cents for the Kindle version in the United States this week, in the United Kingdom next week. So don't miss that opportunity. You can just scan that right there or click on the carousel on Amazon if you're watching us on Amazon. As a final note, before we get Céline on the show here, I do want to mention once again this year I am judging the Content Marketing Awards, which are held by the Content Marketing Institute. So make a note that you can enter the Content Marketing Awards at contentmarketingawards.com. I think that's in another month or two to submit your best work in the last year, last 12 months, something like that. So, but let's get to today's topic. We want to find out about how do we build those relationships as leaders. Command and control does not work as well anymore as it used to. So how do we unlead? And what the heck is unleading? Céline, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Christoph. I'm thrilled to be here.
Really appreciate you making the time. Now, it's always interesting to me. People say, here's how you have to change to lead. And the way you do it is you have to unlead. So tell us, what does that even mean? What does it mean to unlead? And why is that an important topic today for leaders?
So this idea comes from the field. Actually, it comes from a long practice, long experience in the corporate world. It's a world I have experienced. I've been in many years, actually close to 3 decades, and throughout my experience in various business roles, in global roles as well, I've sort of observed how obsolete leadership has become in a way. The way we think of leadership as strong, self-assured, larger than life kind of people, pulling, leading others, getting followers, etc. behind them. This thing has become, in my opinion, completely obsolete. It is no longer adapted to the people, the consumers, the citizens, the workers we have become. Our society has changed dramatically, but we tend to cling to this old approach to leadership, and I find it pretty detrimental to the business, to organizations, to people as well. You see this enormous trend of quiet quitting, but this is just a new name for disengagement, which was already there and growing. And I believe there are other ways to lead human collectives, other ways based on maybe a new approach to leadership. What does it mean to lead in the 21st century? And I think it's that there are very different principles behind leadership today.
Very interesting. And don't make me go down the rabbit hole of quiet quitting at the end of the day. Quiet quitting, in my opinion, is just you doing the job you're hired to do. And especially in marketing, and I talk about this in my book, is Marketing a Good Career as well, is you could work 24 hours a day. At some point you have to call it a day, you have to move on. You could do one more thing, you could do one more live stream, you could have one more meeting, you could, whatever. people are doing their job. But what I'm interested in specifically when it comes to this new way of leading, or maybe you're not leading, but how do you, you called it, I think there's other ways to lead.
Mm,
So how do we do that? How do we kind of
yeah.
learn those ways? And are you still a leader if you're unleading, I guess?
Mm. I believe you're very much a leader. I believe leadership is, in essence, still very much needed, obviously. However, it is based on a whole different set of principles than the ones we may have considered in the past and which have served us until recently. So I approach things under the with three main principles in mind. The first one is um, revolves around liberty, around autonomy, around freedom, creating more freedom in the system rather than less. You talked about command and control. We all know it is passé. We need to let go of that. But what's coming next? Is it chaos? Is it everybody does what they want? No, of course not. There needs to be some coherence and organization and all that. But I believe for this, we need more agency, not less, more accountability. And accountability can only come from the people themselves. That's why creating more opportunities for autonomous judgment in the organization is not hampering performance. On the contrary, it's an enabler of performance. So that's just the first principle. And it starts with oneself. It starts with um, seeing the system, seeing what we personally maintain, perpetuate from old practices which are no longer useful. So what do I need to change first before I can try to change anything in the system, right? So that's the first principle. The second principle is a principle of equality, equality in diversity, I would say. The usual patterns of domination and submission that abound in the workplace have become obsolete and counterproductive, really. And the idea is to leverage a more networked approach to work and to the flow of information so that the whole organization can benefit from its own diversity rather than restrict it. And finally, the third and last principle is one of chosen togetherness. How do you keep the network together? How do you make it stick together? Not through extensive bureaucracy, structure, etc., but by creating this, by inspiring this willingness to be together, to do things together, and that's what I call fraternity. Overall, this is generating, but also this is conditioned to what I call relational leadership or engagement leadership, which can be defined, in other words, as a collective form of leadership. A collective form of leadership based on the ability of people to create relationships, that is to be able to connect with people who are different from them. It's easy to connect with someone like us, or someone who looks or sounds familiar, but how easy is it to connect with people who are very different from us? And that's where the new challenge, I would say, is, right? How do we cultivate, develop, nurture a sort of a relational fluency, right? This capacity to connect with in diversity. And I think this is not less work than the current, strong man or strong woman leadership. It is more work, but it is a sort of more of a self-effacing kind of work. Once you've enabled a super strong collective that is so strong and so well, working so well that it can work, it's time to move on and continue and go pollinate other collectives. That's my view of effective leadership in the 21st century.
It's interesting to me. Certainly, liberty and togetherness helps content strategists, specifically content
Mm.
creators, to create better experiences, right? Because you have the ability to think about it. You're not just picking up a drive-through order and saying, "Hey, make this look pretty, make this sound good," whatever. But you're
Mm.
you can be really creative and you can figure out how do you solve a specific problem. But the problem I see sometimes, and maybe even the first time I led a team, well, maybe not the first time, but definitely the second time, perhaps, um, you model your behavior on the people that you grew up with, the leaders that you
Yeah.
saw previously.
Mm.
Here we have Martin Boyle. I think he is sharing our conversation, tagging Joe. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. Ducaro. I don't know if
It
that's how you
looks
say
like a
it.
French
Martin.
name, Ducaro.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Really interesting conversation, Martin. Really appreciate that for you to jump in. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. That's super easy to do. Just ask the questions if you're watching on the live stream here. We're going to just throw up that ticker here for a while. So, but we model our behavior based on what we know and what we see. And there is still a lot of that strong man or strong woman. I'm the leader, follow
Yeah.
my lead. I mean, literally,
Yeah.
it's all, that's literally in the title. So, how do leaders adjust? How do leaders learn? Because at the end of the day, companies are still hiring supervisors, managers, people to lead a team, right?
Yeah.
So how do we make that work?
Yes, I believe it starts. That's why I say it starts with oneself. It doesn't. If we keep expecting the company to change, or the CEO to change, or HR to hire different people, or things will never happen. Let's start with us. How do we um, include more people, for example, in our decision making? The best content marketer, the most creative person in the world has his or her blind spots. We all have, right? So how do we, and the best content, and I've seen that a gazillion times in the corporate world, the best content falls on people who are more or less receptive, and sometimes not receptive at all, because the content just seems weird. It just seems odd, not in line, not yeah, not in resonance with people's lived experiences. And so my challenge is, I mean, the challenge I offer to content marketers in particular is, how can you, instead of creating all the content which you think is meaningful and relevant, how can you invite people to create content together and together with you? How can you enable more people to become great at content creation? Because then the process of creating the content themselves and together with others generates this authorship, which is the key element of engagement. People own what they help create, right? People own what they help create. This is one of the key principles of this unleadership model, I would say. And this is why I believe that the best skills at content generation, strategy design, whatever, weighs little as compared to the invitation, the collaboration, the engagement skill. Because again, the best strategy, the one that will be endorsed, that will generate engagement by people, sustainable engagement, is the strategy or the content that will have been made by them. Because by multiplying, by creating, by inviting this diversity in at the very earliest, the earliest stages of creation, of design, etc., reduces the risk of blind spots, but also it creates more like relevancy, but it also adds to this element of engagement through authorship or ownership. And it's sustainable, because that way you also generate more empowerment and new connections throughout the system, which makes it extremely productive and effective.
Just a friendly reminder for anyone who was invited to the live stream, or you heard about the live stream. The replay is also available on all the social channels. It stays here, so wherever you see the live stream, you can watch the replay as well. Well, you just mentioned, Céline, when it comes to owning whatever you're creating, I mean, I know plenty of examples from my lifetime where people didn't want to leave a job or didn't want to leave a certain place or whatever because, oh, but this is my baby. This is my
Mm.
project. I own this. Now I know
Mm.
some, executives might say, "Well, see, it's not just about paying people money." Well, you know what? Pay people correctly and appropriately and give them raises and whatnot. But, there is something to be said about that because people, when they feel an ownership in the creation, whatever it is they're creating, maybe that's one way to keep them engaged, to have them stay with the company for a longer time period.
I believe so. And interestingly, it works across cultures. I've been involved in global projects across regions as different as the US and India and France, for example. And in all those regions, people share a common desire to be respected, to matter for the business, to act, to contribute to something bigger than themselves, right? And we can tap into this energy, which is too often, and I really don't understand why, left aside. This is a huge potential of growth, of success, of customer care. Of It's a fantastic potential for performance. And you don't get that by hammering people with messages, right? You get that by creating real, lasting, since authentic opportunities to collaborate, to join the project, and not just once in a while through a mere focus group or whatever. It's by really rethinking the decision making in your organization so as to involve more people, like the people who are supposed to be affected, impacted by whatever decision. Well, invite at least a representative sample, volunteers, open up to goodwill in your. So it's a bit challenging. I'm aware of that, right? But the reward is so much higher than the current approach, which is extremely lean and focused and based on small teams. And we can be agile and we can be effective still in a model that involves a lot of people and that involves a flow of engagement, participation, and conversation. It's this continuous, sense making, collective sense making, and sense of authorship and ownership that needs to be nurtured in the living systems that organizations are.
What I always find interesting about leaders when they first get into leadership roles, right? They want to direct, they want to tell people do
Mm,
this and do that and be
yeah.
very, very specific. One trick that has worked pretty well for me is instead of telling people exactly what to do, tell them
Hmm.
what the goal is. Here's what we're trying to
Mm,
accomplish. Here's what we're trying to do. And that's actually a very good way to get people to think about it and own the
mm.
problem and own the
Yes.
solution as well.
Yes, correct. And I would even challenge you, Christoph, and say, can you go like one step further in that and invite people in the sense making, like so that collectively a decision is made on what is it we need to do and why, right? What are the conditions? What's happening? What are right? Even before a decision is made on what needs to happen, that is creating so much more engagement. And it can be really useful and helpful. However, it requires the leader or the leaders to accept to being challenged themselves, right? And that's not easy.
That is not easy. But what's interesting is how do leaders get there? How do leaders actually figure that out to have that discussion and let people do that? So here we have Simon um, Duckert. Simon Duckert. That sounds like a German name to me. Maybe it's
Yes.
Simon Duquette. I
Uh,
don't know. Good old Drucker's management by objectives. How does that fit,
How does
Celine?
that fit? Hey, Simon. Hi. I know Simon. We've met in conferences. Um, I am. Um, I know we owe a lot to Peter Drucker. He said so many wise things early on. However, I think it's not just that. It's not just management by objective. I think it's again deeper than that. It's about involving people so that together we think about the objectives, right? rather than just telling people, okay, that's the objective, and now you do what you achieve them however you want, in the way you best think is relevant here. Here I would say again, it's a bit deeper than that. It's about thinking of creating this, focusing on the social capital of an organization first and foremost as the the performance enabler. What will make it work is those deep and strong connections all across the system, this network of trusted relationships. So how do we create that instead of the very siloed organizations we mostly have today? How do we, which are, an inheritance from the past, and which Peter Drucker rightfully said that they needed to evolve. How do we reconnect? How do we connect the system to more of itself in all sorts of different ways, and not just through project teams, for example? Because this is again, this is a reflection of an. This is another output of the industrial mechanistic way of approaching organizations. But how can we create more of a living environment, something that is really dynamic and fluid and organic? So I've been working a lot with volunteer teams, for example, volunteer networks, and not just for the small stuff, but really for the important stuff, for performance, for strategy, for content, for communication approaches, and so on. And I can only recommend to work along those lines because they are so effective.
Yeah, it's just so interesting to think about how do things evolve? What do we do? How do we make it work? Really briefly, let's talk about equality. I know you have about 30 pages in the book about that topic, and how important is equality? How does it actually work in on these teams? And why is it important? I mean, when I saw that chapter, I thought about when Michelle Nagomi was on the show, and she talked about, I don't care if you're in Iowa or not, where 90 some percent of everybody is white. You need diversity, you need different trains of thoughts. It's not just
Mm.
about different races necessarily, but it's about different life experiences. How important are those things to actually make a model like this work?
Yeah, it is a critical point, Christoph. In inequalities in status and in access to information, those domination relationships and obedience, they have become impediments to performance in a complex world, in a fast moving world where customers' expectations are more diverse than ever. And so we need the whole system to be intelligent, to be not just a few executives at the top or a few experts here or there. We need a whole system to understand the complexity and to relate well to the diversity of the external world. And that's why we need to let go, to remove as much as possible those domination and submission relationships in the system. It is not because you are a senior exec that you are more clever and more, how can I say, relevant than a frontline worker. Both are extremely clever, both are extremely relevant. We are all experts in our own context. So the key is here to connect those different pieces of knowledge, right? To make each other see, to make people see each other, recognize the value of each other, and work with each other. I give you an example. In all the projects I work in, I work with cross sections of the enterprise, with people belonging to different levels, working together. It rarely happens. Honestly, it is very rare. And yet, every time I do it, I work this way, it is enormously effective. People like it's an eye opener for people at all levels. Why? Because usually we just stratify work, and
Yeah.
organizations work, solve problems layer by layer. They rarely achieve this diversity of views, and that's a pity.
everybody has different perspectives, and certainly it helps us enjoy the ride
Mhm.
better. I mean, that's for sure that is true.
Yeah.
Now, Celine, tell us really quickly here in the last 15 seconds or so, how do people connect with you? How do they work with you? And who should reach out to you?
All right. So they can find me on my website, weneedsocial.com. I'm on all social media as well. And yes, I work with organizations for training, courses, workshops, bespoke consulting work, and more.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review our show on your favorite podcast channels. And don't forget to share this episode with your networks. We appreciate you. Until next time,